The Grand Zephyrin Empire was known for its warriors, its wealth, and its untouchable princess, Vela. She was admired across the stars, but not a single male had ever gained her favor. The most powerful lords and strongest champions had tried, and all had failed. She rejected every suitor without hesitation. To her, they were unworthy, predictable, and boring. Tonight, another group of elite suitors gathered in the Grand Palace, standing before her towering throne. Each of them, the best of their kind, had come hoping to impress her. They had no idea they had already lost. Vela leaned on her armrest, barely paying attention to the speeches of these men. Flattery, promises, power. She had heard it all before. None of them interested her. She sighed, ready to dismiss them all. Then the doors of the hall opened, and a single figure walked in. A human. The court fell into a stunned silence. Humans were rare in Zephyrin politics, often seen as weaker compared to other species. They lacked the strength of the Zephyrins, the speed of the Draken, or the intelligence of the Velter. Yet this human walked in without hesitation, his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. His name was Callum Drake, a diplomat from the United Earth Alliance. He had been sent to negotiate a trade agreement with the Zephyrins. He had no interest in the suitors or the princess's hand. He had simply arrived at the scheduled meeting time, unaware that he had walked into a gathering of rejected males. Vela's golden eyes studied him. Unlike the others, he did not kneel. He did not offer flowery words or desperate gestures. Instead, he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, as if she were just another political figure. The court gasped at his lack of respect, but Vela found herself intrigued. "What is this?" She finally spoke, her voice smooth yet commanding. "A human dares to stand before me without bowing." Callum raised an eyebrow. "I wasn't aware I was supposed to." His tone was calm, even amused. "I'm here for a diplomatic meeting. If this is a private event, I can wait outside." The hall fell into shocked silence. No one had ever spoken to her so casually. The suitors turned red with fury. They had spent years trying to earn even a moment of Vela's attention, and yet, this human, this outsider, had captured it effortlessly. Vela's lips curved into a rare smirk. This human was interesting. For the first time in her life, she didn't immediately reject someone. Instead, she leaned forward and said, "Stay." And just like that, everything changed. The tension in the grand hall was thick enough to cut with a blade. The suitors, once proud and confident, now stood frozen, glaring at the human who had unknowingly walked into their competition. But Callum Drake, he didn't seem to care. He stood with his hands in his pockets, completely at ease, as if he were in a simple business meeting, instead of in the presence of a royal princess known for rejecting every male in the galaxy. Princess Vela studied him with sharp golden eyes. She had expected arrogance from a warrior, desperation from a noble, or smooth deception from a politician. But this human, he was different. "You speak boldly, human," she said, her voice carrying a quiet power that made most men nervous. "Do you not fear offending me?" Callum shrugged. "I don't see why I should. I came here for a trade meeting, not to impress a princess." Gasps filled the room. No one had ever spoken to Vela like that. The suitors bristled with anger. One of them, a towering Zephyrin warrior named Korek, stepped forward, his sharp fangs bared. "You dare to show such disrespect?" Korek growled. "Do you even know who you are speaking to, human?" Callum glanced at him lazily. "Yeah, Princess Vela, ruler of this empire's second colony. Smart, rich, and apparently impossible to impress." He smirked. "I didn't come here to try, anyway." Vela's eyes narrowed. His words weren't just bold. They were dangerous. Every male who sought her favor fought for her attention, begged for a chance. But this human, he was ignoring the very thing that made her untouchable. He wasn't even trying to win her over. And that made him far more interesting than any of these desperate fools. The court expected her to lash out, to demand an apology, to put this arrogant human in his place. But instead, she laughed. It was soft at first, then rich with amusement, a real laugh. Korak's face twisted in disbelief. The other suitors exchanged uneasy glances. Princess Vela never laughed. She stood from her throne, walking down the steps until she was standing before Callum. Her gaze was intense, her presence commanding. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. "You are unlike any male I have ever met," she murmured, tilting her head. "Tell me, Callum Drake, do humans think themselves superior to the Zephyrians?" Callum chuckled. "Not really. But we do have a habit of not following rules that don't make sense to us." Vela's smirk widened. She liked that answer. The suitors hated it. Korak stepped closer, his muscles tensed. "Perhaps we should teach this human some manners," he sneered. Vela held up a hand, stopping him. Her gaze never left Callum. "I have a better idea," she said, voice smooth like silk. "Let's see just how clever this human truly is." Her golden eyes gleamed with challenge. Callum only smirked in return. The grand hall remained silent as Princess Vela stood before Callum, her golden eyes gleaming with amusement and challenge. Every suitor in the room had tried to win her favor with power, wealth, or strength. None had succeeded. But this human, he wasn't even trying. And that made him far more interesting than any of the others. Vela took a slow step forward, her royal robes flowing behind her like liquid gold. The tension was thick, the other males glaring at Callum with pure hatred. "You are bold, human," Vela said, circling him like a predator. "But I wonder, are you also clever?" Callum's lips quirked into a small smirk. "I like to think so." The suitors scoffed, but Vela's interest only grew. She had met many warriors, many kings, many arrogant fools who thought they could impress her. Yet this human had done something none of them ever could. He had made her curious. "Then let's test it," Vela said smoothly. "I propose a challenge." Callum raised an eyebrow. "A challenge?" Vela turned to her court. "Since my suitors seem eager to put you in your place, let us do so through something more civilized. A contest of wits and skill." Korak, the Zephyrin warrior, stepped forward with a deep growl. "A battle? He wouldn't last a minute against me." Vela chuckled. "Not everything must be settled with brute strength, Korak." She turned back to Callum. "Let's make a wager, human. If you win, I will grant you a personal favor, anything within reason." Callum's smirk widened. "And if I lose?" Vela's gaze darkened playfully. "Then you will kneel before me and admit that humans are inferior." The court erupted in murmurs. The suitors grinned. This human had no chance. Callum, however, didn't seem fazed. Instead, he laughed. Vela blinked, slightly caught off guard. "Something funny." Callum crossed his arms. "It's just, usually when someone challenges me, they bet on something more interesting than a speech and a kneel." A dangerous glint flashed in Vela's eyes. "Are you saying my wager is not worth your time?" Callum shrugged. "I mean, if you're so confident that I'll lose, why not make it more interesting?" The court gasped again. Was this human actually negotiating a better bet with the princess? Vela studied him for a long moment. Then, a slow smile curved her lips. "Very well, Callum Drake," she purred. "If you win, I will personally give you anything you desire, within my power." The air crackled with tension. The suitors looked furious. Callum extended his hand. "Deal." Vela didn't hesitate. She took his hand and gripped it firmly. "You better not bore me, human," she whispered. Callum only smirked. The Grand Zephyrin Palace was filled with whispers and murmurs. A human had challenged the untouchable princess, and she had accepted. No one had ever come this far. Every suitor before had been dismissed. Yet here was Callum Drake, standing confidently before Princess Vela, preparing for a contest he was never meant to win. The challenge was set. It would be a test of wits, strategy, and skill. No brute force. No physical combat. a game where only intelligence mattered. Vela led Callum and the court to an ornate chamber filled with a massive holographic display. It flickered to life, showing a complex, ancient strategy game, one that had been played by Zephyrin rulers for centuries. "This is the trial of the mind," Vela explained, her voice smooth and confident. "A game of war, deception, and control. Only the most brilliant leaders have ever mastered it." The suitors grinned. Callum had no chance. The game was played on a giant board, with holographic armies, cities, and territories. The goal? Conquer your opponent's empire before they conquered yours. Vela took her seat across from Callum, golden eyes gleaming with challenge. "Let's see if humans can truly think beyond their own limits." Callum smirked and sat down. "I was going to say the same thing about Zephyrin's." The game began. Vela made her first move, aggressive, fast, and precise. Her strategy was overwhelming, crushing anything in her path. Callum, he played differently. Instead of focusing on expansion, he fortified his defenses, letting Vela take territory. The court laughed. They thought he was playing like a coward. But then, something strange happened. As Vela advanced, Callum's defenses shifted, forcing her to spread her forces too thin. His moves were unpredictable, clever, and calculated. He was luring her in. Vela's smile faltered. She adjusted her strategy, trying to trap him, but Callum was always one step ahead. He used deception, feints, and unexpected plays to outmaneuver her. He was forcing her into mistakes. The court's laughter died. The suitors stared in disbelief. The human was winning. Vela leaned forward, golden eyes narrowing. For the first time in years, she felt something new during a challenge. Excitement. She grinned. Not bad. Human. Callum's eyes glinted with amusement. "I thought I wasn't supposed to be." The game continued, both players locked in a battle of minds. The tension in the chamber was thick, the audience unable to look away. But as the game neared its climax, it was clear Vela was losing. For the first time in her life, someone had outsmarted her, and she was loving every second of it. The chamber was silent. The once arrogant suitors had turned into stunned spectators, watching something unbelievable unfold before their eyes. Princess Vela, the untouchable, undefeated Zephyrin royal, was losing. And the one defeating her, a human. Callum Drake sat across from her, his expression relaxed but focused. The strategy game between them had reached its final moments, and the board told a clear story. Vela was trapped. She had played aggressively, pushing forward with confidence, certain she would crush him like she had crushed all others before. But Callum, he had played differently. He had let her think she was winning, all while carefully setting up his final move. And now, there was nothing she could do. The court watched, holding their breath, waiting for Vela to react. Would she rage? Would she declare the game unfair? Would she punish Callum for daring to defeat her? No. Instead, she laughed. A genuine, rich laugh that echoed through the chamber. The suitors looked at each other in confusion. Why was she laughing? Callum raised an eyebrow. Didn't expect that reaction. Vela smirked, her golden eyes burning with something new. Amusement, excitement, and respect. "I must admit, human," she said, leaning forward. "I did not expect to enjoy losing." Callum chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." She studied him for a long moment. Most males would have bragged about their victory. They would have rubbed it in her face, trying to make themselves look superior. But not him. He didn't see her as a prize. He saw her as an equal. That thought unsettled her, but she didn't hate it. The tension was broken when Korak, the Zephyrin warrior, slammed his fist onto the table. His face was twisted with rage. "This means nothing," he growled. "It was a mere game. It proves nothing about this human's worth." Callum leaned back in his chair. "You sound upset." Korak bared his fangs. "You think intelligence makes you strong. You think strategy makes you worthy of standing beside our princess. He stepped closer, towering over Callum. Perhaps you should prove yourself in a real challenge. Callum sighed. I had a feeling this was coming. Vela's smirk widened. Are you challenging him to the gauntlet? A ripple of shock ran through the court. The gauntlet was not just a test of strength. It was a brutal survival trial. No human had ever attempted it. Korak crossed his arms. Unless he's afraid. Callum exhaled through his nose. I really need to learn when to keep my mouth shut. Vela tilted her head. So, human, do you accept? Callum smirked. I never back down from a challenge. The court erupted with excitement and anticipation. The gauntlet was no ordinary challenge. It was a brutal test of strength, endurance, and survival. Even the strongest Zephyrin warriors struggled to complete it. And now, a human was about to face it. Callum exhaled slowly, rubbing the back of his neck as he looked at the massive arena being prepared. He wasn't a soldier, nor was he enhanced like many other species. Physically, he was at a disadvantage. But that never stopped a human before. Princess Vela leaned against her throne, her golden eyes gleaming with curiosity. Are you sure about this, Callum Drake? She asked. You can still back out. Callum smirked. Now why would I do that? I still need my favor from you. The court gasped at his boldness, but Vela laughed, a rare and genuine sound. Very well, she said, standing gracefully. The challenge begins now. The gauntlet was a three-part trial. First, the trial of endurance, a race through a shifting maze, filled with traps, energy barriers, and mechanical guardians. Second, the trial of strength, lifting and moving heavy objects under extreme conditions. Third, the trial of will, a mental test where a participant had to resist Zephyrin mind illusions, designed to break even the strongest warriors. Callum took his place at the starting line. Korak, his Zephyrin opponent, stood beside him, flexing his massive muscles. You will regret this, human, he sneered. Callum sighed. You guys are really bad at trash talk. Vela raised her hand. Begin. The first trial started. Callum sprinted into the shifting maze, his mind racing. The walls moved randomly, blocking paths and opening new ones. Laser traps fired at unexpected angles, forcing him to duck and weave. Korak, with his raw power, smashed through obstacles, using brute force to move ahead. But Callum, he analyzed the patterns, using his agility and intelligence instead of strength. He anticipated wall shifts, sidestep traps, and found the quickest path. When he emerged first, the court gasped. A human had beaten a Zephyrin in speed. Korak snarled. Beginner's luck. The second trial began. Massive stone pillars needed to be lifted and arranged in a pattern. Korak easily lifted the stones, placing them down like they were feathers. Callum, he used leverage, balance, and angles to move the heavy objects. Brains over brawn. It took him longer, but he finished right after Korak, shocking the spectators. Now, only one trial remained. The trial of will. Callum stepped forward, knowing this would be the hardest. Princess Vela's gaze locked onto him. Would he survive, or would he finally break? Callum smirked, ready for whatever came next. The trial of will was not about strength or speed. It was a test of the mind. Zephyrin warriors had trained their entire lives to resist its effects. Even the strongest of them had collapsed in defeat. And now, a human was about to face it. Callum stood in the center of the arena, facing a large Zephyrin mind crystal, glowing with an eerie blue light. This ancient relic could create powerful illusions, forcing challengers to relive their greatest fears, weaknesses, and regrets. His opponent, Korak, smirked confidently. This is where you break, human. Callum shrugged. You've been saying that since we started. Still waiting. The court laughed nervously, unsure whether Callum was fearless or just foolish. Princess Vela, watching from her throne, felt something strange. She was supposed to enjoy seeing challengers fall, proving themselves unworthy. But with Callum, she wanted him to win. She shook the thought away as the mind crystal pulsed, filling the arena with a blinding light. Then the illusions began. Inside Callum's mind, the world around him shifted. He was no longer in the Zephyran arena. He was standing in a dark, cold battlefield, a memory from his past. The sounds of war filled his ears. Explosions, screams, the smell of burning metal and flesh. He knew this place. He had been here before. It was the day he lost everything. His team had been ambushed on a distant colony. His closest friends gone. And no matter what he did, no matter how hard he fought, he had failed to save them. A voice whispered in his ear, "You are weak. You are nothing." Shadows surrounded him, taking the shapes of those he had lost. Their eyes were filled with blame and disappointment. Callum clenched his fists. His breathing was heavy. His heart pounded. But then, he smiled. The shadows hesitated. Callum chuckled, shaking his head. "Really? This is what you throw at me?" The voices snarled. "You cannot escape your failures, human." Callum exhaled slowly. "I know, and that's okay." He looked around at the ghosts of his past, his voice steady. "I made mistakes. I have regrets. But I don't let them break me." The illusions shattered. The court gasped as the blue light of the mind crystal flickered and died. Callum stood, completely unharmed. He had beaten the trial of will. Korak had collapsed. The proud Zephyran warrior lay on his knees, shaking from the weight of his own illusions. He had failed. Princess Vela slowly rose from her throne, her golden eyes filled with something new. Admiration, respect, and something deeper. Callum had won. The human had done what no one else ever could. And for the first time in her life, Vela felt herself losing. The arena was filled with a stunned silence. The mind crystal's blue glow had faded, and all eyes were on Callum Drake, the human who had just achieved what no Zephyran warrior had ever done. He had faced the most difficult trial of all, the trial of will, and he had emerged victorious. Princess Vela stood motionless on her throne, her golden eyes fixed on Callum. Her heart raced, a feeling of respect she had never felt before for any male coursing through her. He had done the impossible. The other suitors, those who had been desperate to win her favor, now stood frozen in disbelief. The Zephyran warriors, so certain of their superiority, had watched their pride shatter in a single moment. Callum had outsmarted them all. Vela's lips curved into a small smile, the first real smile she had shown in years. She was impressed. "You've proven yourself, Callum Drake," she said, her voice calm but filled with admiration. "You've won the challenge, and I will honor my word. What is it you desire as your reward?" Callum took a step forward, still breathing heavily from the trials. His heart was racing, but it wasn't from the exertion of the challenges. It was the weight of what was to come. He had been through wars. He had faced death countless times. But this was different. This was about something he never expected, and he wasn't sure how to handle it. Vela had asked for his reward, and her gaze was steady, waiting for his answer. Callum hesitated, trying to process what was at stake. This wasn't about land or riches. This was a chance to ask for something meaningful. He could ask for anything. Anything. The court watched in anticipation. The suitors who had laughed at him, who had scorned him, now held their breath. They couldn't believe what they were witnessing. And then Callum spoke, his voice steady. "I don't want power or wealth. I don't want land or title." He looked directly at Vela, locking eyes with her. "I want your respect. I want you to see me as more than just a human." Vela's eyes flickered with something unreadable. The room seemed to grow quiet, but she didn't break eye contact. "I've never seen anyone look at me the way you do," Callum continued. "And that's something no amount of riches or glory can replace. So, yes, I want your respect. But I also want you to understand that, just like you, I'm capable of more than you can see." The room was silent. And then, slowly, Vela stood. Her movements were graceful, yet there was something more beneath the surface, something unexpected. She stepped down from the throne, walking toward him with purpose. As she reached him, she stopped, standing just inches away. The court held their breath. "Callum Drake," she said softly, her voice now full of something else, a hint of something deeper. "You have done more than I ever expected. And you have shown me that humans are far more than we believe." For a moment, there was no sound except the quiet beating of their hearts. And then, in a quiet voice that only Callum could hear, Vela added, "You are everything I never knew I needed." Callum's heart skipped a beat. He had won the challenge, yes, but in doing so, he had earned something far more valuable than a prize. He had earned her respect, and perhaps something even deeper. As the court erupted in whispers, Vela stepped back, her gaze never leaving Callum. "You have my respect, Callum. But remember, this is only the beginning." The Zephyrin court was in chaos. The royal hall, once filled with the sounds of formal chatter and self-assured suitors, was now filled with murmurs of disbelief and awe. Callum Drake, the human diplomat, had not only won the most challenging tests, he had earned Princess Vela's respect. The court had never seen anything like it. The Zephyrin warriors, the noble lords, and even the highest-ranking officials had never expected a mere human to stand up to their princess, let alone win her favor. The stakes had always been high, but now they felt as if the ground beneath them was shifting. Vela stood at the head of the hall, still gazing at Callum, her golden eyes filled with admiration, and something more. Her heart, usually as cold as the palace itself, was stirred by the human who had outwitted her, outlasted her trials, and shown that he was not like the others. But in the background, whispers grew louder. There were those who would never accept this. Korak, the Zephyrin warrior who had lost the challenge to Callum, stood rigid in the shadows, his jaw clenched tightly. He had been the pride of the court, the one everyone expected to win the princess's favor. And now, he had been bested by a human. The thought gnawed at him. "This is unacceptable," Korak growled under his breath. His fists tightened, and the tension in his body was palpable. A human winning the Zephyrin challenge. This is a disgrace. He wasn't alone in his thoughts. Several noble families muttered among themselves, glaring at Callum, some even looking to challenge his victory. But none dared to speak out directly. Not with Vela watching. Callum stood calmly at the center of the room, eyes scanning the shifting expressions around him. He had won, yes, but the battle was far from over. He could feel the heat of the court's judgment on his shoulders. It was only a matter of time before someone openly questioned the validity of his success. Vela's voice rang out across the room, silencing the whispers. "I have made my decision," she declared, her voice commanding. She turned to face the court, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of control over the room. "This human has earned my respect and my favor. He is worthy of standing beside me, not just as a representative of his people, but as my equal." A few of the suitors shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to speak against the princess. They had seen her power, her unshakable confidence. To challenge her now would be to risk everything. But Korak, his pride wounded, stepped forward. "Princess, surely you jest. A human. This is an insult to our traditions. He is not one of us." Vela's gaze hardened, but she did not break eye contact with Korak. "What is it that you fear, Korak?" she asked, her voice low but laced with authority. "Is it the human or the fact that you've lost? You were outsmarted, and if you cannot accept that, then it is you who is unworthy of standing in my court." The room fell into a heavy silence. Korak's face flushed with rage, but he knew he was beaten. Callum didn't speak, but he knew the challenge was over. He had earned Vela's respect, and now he had proven to the entire court that humans could not be dismissed as weak or insignificant. As Vela turned her gaze back to him, A rare smile appeared on her lips. "This is only the beginning, Callum. There are many more challenges ahead for you, but I have no doubt that you will rise to meet them." Callum nodded, his expression softening. He hadn't expected to come this far, but now that he had, he couldn't back down. Not now. The tension in the grand hall was palpable, the echoes of the earlier confrontation still lingering in the air. Callum stood at the center of it all, feeling the weight of the court's judgment. His victory in the gauntlet had been a shocking display of human resilience, but now, with all eyes on him, he knew this was only the beginning. Princess Vela had declared him her equal. She had granted him the respect he had fought so hard to earn. But with that came new responsibilities, new challenges that he wasn't fully prepared for. The court was still buzzing with quiet conversations. Some nobles seemed to accept Vela's decision, though with obvious reluctance, while others were still in shock. But the powerful silence that Vela had imposed on them made it clear. She had made her choice, and no one would dare challenge her now. The princess, however, knew that even with this victory, Callum had a difficult road ahead. The decision to stand by his side would not be without consequences. There would be those who would resent him, who would view him as a threat to the very foundation of their society. As the murmurs of the court slowly faded, Vela stepped forward, her voice steady, but her eyes softer than before. "Callum, I know you didn't come here to win my favor, but now that you have it, I must ask you one thing." Callum raised an eyebrow, unsure of where this was going. He had already proven himself in the trials. What more could she want from him? Vela paused, then continued, her tone slightly more serious. "You've earned a place here in the Zifferin Empire, but this decision comes with risks. There will be those who will not accept your presence, who will try to undermine you and the relationship we've just begun." He nodded, his eyes meeting hers. He had expected as much. Humans had always been viewed as inferior by many species in the galaxy. It wasn't easy to change centuries-old perceptions. "I understand," Callum said, "but if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that you can't let fear control you. You can't back down." Vela looked at him with something more than respect, admiration, even. She had always been in control, never letting anyone dictate her actions. And yet, here was this human, standing in front of her, not with arrogance but with an unwavering confidence. Something about him made her believe that, despite the odds, they could forge a future together. "This isn't just about you and me," she said quietly, her gaze steady. "It's about our people, our worlds. The choices we make now will ripple through the galaxy." Callum took a deep breath. "Then let's make it count." Vela's lips curled into a smile, though it was softer than any smile she had ever given before. "You're right, Callum. Together, we can change the way the universe sees humanity." As they stood there, the weight of their shared decision settled between them. The court had witnessed something historic, something unexpected. A human, once thought to be weak and insignificant, had not only earned the princess's favor, but had proven himself to be her partner. It was a new beginning for both of them. The challenges ahead would be great, but Callum knew that with Vela by his side, nothing would be impossible. He had earned her respect. And now he had earned the chance to stand beside her as an equal, not just in the court, but in life. The universe would never look at humanity the same way again.